My name is Gabrielle Townsend, and at 36, I watched my stepmother point at me across my father's ballroom and tell a guard to take me out. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I picked up my coat and walked to the door. But by the time the valet brought my car around, I'd stopped being the woman who walks away quietly. The hotel they were all standing in had never really been theirs, and they were about to find out the hard way. That night was the first time in 16 years I'd walked back into the building my mother built with her own two hands. It was also the night I stopped pretending I didn't know exactly who I was. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally stop apologizing for taking up space, and the truth does the talking. If a family ever made you feel like a guest in your own history, you're going to want to hear how this one ends. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I built my life 3 hours from that harbor, on purpose. My office takes up the second floor of an old brick walk-up downtown, Townsend Property Law. My name on the door, paid for by my own work, not 1 cent of it borrowed from family. I draft leases. I close commercial deals. I read trust documents the way other people read the news, line by line, looking for the trapdoor. For 16 years, that was the whole arrangement. I didn't call them. They didn't call me. The silence felt like peace, and I let myself believe peace and absence were the same thing. Then the invitation came. Heavy cream cardstock, gold lettering, the Harbor Crown's 40th anniversary gala, hosted by Richard and Vivian Hale, my father's name first, his wife's name second. My mother's name nowhere on it at all. There was a handwritten line at the bottom, in my father's shaky print. "We'd love for you to come, Gabby." A peace offering, I suppose. The first words he'd sent me in 4 years. I almost threw it away. Twice. What stopped me wasn't him. It was the address printed under the gold lettering. The Harbor Crown. The waterfront. The building my mother turned from a rotting inn into the finest hotel on the coast. I wasn't going for my father. I wasn't going for the wine or the speeches. I was going to stand in a room she made and remember that she once made it. I told myself I'd stay an hour. I didn't make it 20 minutes. You have to understand what my mother did because nobody at that gala wanted to remember it. Diane Townsend bought the Harbor Crown in 1985, when it was a 40-room ruin with a leaking roof and a dock nobody trusted. The bank laughed at her. She mortgaged everything twice. She painted rooms herself. She learned the boiler by hand. By the time I was old enough to walk the halls, the place ran like a watch. Senators booked the corner suites. Couples planned weddings 2 years out. And every evening at 6, the bell on the old harbor buoy rang across the water, low and steady. And my mother would stop whatever she was doing to listen to it. She put a brass plaque by the tall window in the lobby, the one that looked straight out at the dock. She had it engraved with one line, "Built on the water, kept by the people who mean it." I used to trace the letters with my finger while she worked. She got sick the winter I turned 20. Pancreatic. The kind that doesn't negotiate. She ran the hotel from a chair until she couldn't, and then from a bed until she couldn't do that either. She died in March. I was a sophomore, home for the funeral, numb in a black dress that didn't fit. My father held my hand at the service and said we'd figure it all out together. We never talked about the hotel again. Not once. I assumed it had simply passed to him, the way everything passes to the husband who's still breathing. I was wrong about that. I just wouldn't learn how wrong for 16 more years. Vivian came 3 years after the funeral. She was a hospitality consultant my father hired to modernize the brand. She was 58 now, sharp and polished, with a laugh she could turn on like a tap. Within a year, she was my stepmother. Within 2, she ran the place. I watched it happen from a distance, the way you watch weather move across a bay. First, the foundation. My mother had started the Diane Townsend Fund, a small thing that sent local kids to culinary school. Vivian quietly folded it into something called the Hale Family Initiative. Same money, new name, then the lobby. The brass plaque by the window came down for renovations and never went back up. Then the brand itself. Harbor Crown became the Hale Collection, new logo, new stationery, a glossy website where the founder's story began, Somehow, in the year my father remarried. And then, there was Brooke, Vivian's daughter from her first marriage, 30 now, given the title of creative director and an office on the top floor. Brooke had never poured a coffee in that hotel. She redesigned the napkins. I said something once, 4 years ago, at a Thanksgiving I never should have attended. I asked, gently, why my mother's name was gone from the wall. Vivian set down her wine and looked at me like I'd tracked mud across her floor. Diane's gone, Gabrielle. Her voice was almost kind. This is the Hale era now. My father studied his plate. Brooke smirked into her napkin. I drove home that night and didn't go back for 4 years. Until the gold invitation. Until I let myself believe a peace offering meant peace. The harbor crown still took my breath away from the road, lit up against the dark water, 4 stories of white stone and warm windows. It looked exactly like the photograph my mother kept on her nightstand. I sat in the car for a full minute before I could make myself go in. The lobby was the first wound. Where the brass plaque used to hang by the tall window, there was now a backlit panel, chrome and cold. The Hale Collection. EST. A year that wasn't true. The window still looked out at the dock, but nobody was looking out of it anymore. I was standing there, jacket over my arm, when a voice said my name. My real name. Good to see you home, Miss Townsend. Sal. He'd worked the door since before I was born, and he had to be 70 now, but he still stood like a man who took the job seriously. He took my coat the way he used to take my mother's. Sal. My throat went tight. You're still here. Somebody has to remember the place. He glanced around the lobby, then leaned in, lower. They put the old things up in the 4th floor storage. Your mother's plaque too. I couldn't stop them, but I know where it is. I didn't have time to answer. Across the room, near the champagne tower, Vivian's head turned. Her eyes found me through 40 feet of crystal and conversation, and her smile didn't move at all. She set her glass down on a passing tray, and she started walking toward me, and 3 other people in dark suits started walking too. The room was full. That was the point. Investors clustered near the bar. A reporter from the Regional Business Journal worked the edges with a recorder. 2 members of the hotel's board stood by the windows. My father held court near the dais, gray and tired and laughing too loud at something Brooke had said. Vivian reached me first. Up close, her smile finally dropped. What are you doing here? Dad invited me. I kept my voice level. There's a card with his handwriting. There's been a mistake. She said it loud enough to carry. This is a private event. For family and partners. Heads were turning now. The reporter drifted closer. I am family, I said. That was when she did it. She lifted one manicured hand and signaled the men in the dark suits, and she said it clearly, so the whole circle could hear. Security. Remove her. She's not family. The room went quiet in a ring around us. I looked for my father. He was already there, at my elbow, color rising in his face, but his eyes weren't angry. They were pleading. Gabby. His voice was a whisper meant for me alone. Please, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. 16 years of standing aside, and that was the thing he chose to say. Not to her. To me. Brooke had appeared beside her mother, phone half raised, the smirk fully formed now. A guard touched my arm, gently, embarrassed. He was younger than me. He didn't want to be doing this any more than I wanted it done. I looked at the chrome panel where the plaque used to hang. I looked at the window, at the dark water beyond it. Then I picked up my coat from Sal's hands, turned, and walked out without a single word. Behind me, I heard Vivian's voice, bright again, smoothing it over for the crowd. Some people just can't let go of the past. The cold off the water hit me like a slap, and I was grateful for it. I gave the valet my ticket and stood at the edge of the circular drive, breathing. Out past the dock, in the dark, the old buoy bell rang. 6 o'clock. The same low, steady note my mother used to stop and listen for. It didn't sound like comfort tonight. It sounded like a bell tolling for something already gone. She's not family. Vivian had said it like a fact, like reading a temperature off a thermometer. And the worst part, The part that sat in my chest like a stone was that for 16 years I had let it become a fact. I'd let them take the plaque. I'd let them rename the fund. I'd let my mother's name slide off the building one quiet piece at a time, and I'd called my silence dignity. It wasn't dignity. It was surrender wearing a nicer coat. I didn't want revenge. I want to be clear about that, because what came later wasn't rage. Standing in that cold, watching my breath fog, I felt something colder and steadier than anger. I felt awake. There was a box I had never opened. My mother's things, sealed since the funeral, sitting in a storage unit I paid for every month and never visited. For 16 years I told myself I wasn't ready. I was done not being ready. The valet pulled my car around. I tipped him, got in, and didn't drive home. I drove to the storage unit instead, at 11 o'clock at night, with the heater roaring and my hands steady on the wheel. It was time to find out what my mother had actually left me. Unit 114 smelled like dust and cold concrete. I hadn't been inside in 11 years, not since I'd moved cities and shoved everything I couldn't look at into a 5x10 box of corrugated steel. Most of it was furniture under sheets, a bicycle, tax records I should have shredded. In the back, on a shelf I'd put it on myself, was the cedar box. My mother had it made the year before she got sick. Tight-grained wood the color of honey, a small brass latch, her initials burned into the lid. She kept her important things in it, and after she died, my father handed it to me at the funeral and said, "This is yours. Just yours." I'd never opened it. 16 years, and I had never lifted the lid. I carried it to the front of the unit and set it on an overturned crate under the bare bulb. The latch was stiff. My hands, which had been so steady on the wheel, were not steady now. I want to tell you, I opened it right away. I didn't. I sat on the cold floor with that box in my lap, and I cried for the first time in years. Not the polite tears of a funeral, but the ugly kind, the kind that come when you finally stop holding a door shut. I cried for my mother. I cried for the 20-year-old in the dress that didn't fit. I cried for every 6 o'clock bell I'd refused to hear. When it passed, I wiped my face on my sleeve and put my thumb on the latch. And I still couldn't do it. Some doors, it turns out, you have to be invited through, even by the dead. Instead of the latch, I remembered her voice. It came back the way old voices do, all at once, complete. The last winter she was strong enough to sit up, she'd had me push her chair to the lobby window. The dock was iced over. The bell was silent under the cold. She'd watched the water a long time before she spoke. "You know what I figured out about this place, Gabby?" I was 20 and frightened and pretending I wasn't. "What, Mom?" "The water doesn't belong to whoever's loudest." She'd taken my hand then, her grip already thinner than I remembered. "It belongs to whoever stays." I'd thought she meant the hotel staff. The loyal ones. Sal at the door. The chef who'd been with her 20 years. I had not understood. I'd filed it away as something a sick woman says when she's tired, the way you nod at a grandparent's riddle and move on. Sitting on that storage floor at midnight, the cedar box in my lap, I understood that she had been telling me something specific. Something she expected me to find later. My mother did not waste words. Not even dying ones. Whoever stays. I had not stayed. I'd left. I'd let the loudest woman in 3 counties walk into my mother's house and call it her own, but the box was still mine. Just mine. My father had said so himself. I looked down at the brass latch, and this time when I put my thumb to it, my hand didn't shake. I didn't open it yet. But I knew now that whatever was inside, my mother had left it on purpose, for a daughter she trusted to eventually come looking, so I started looking. The latch gave with a small click. The lid lifted, and I braced for grief. Photographs, maybe. A lock of hair. The small wreckage of a life that ends too early. That wasn't what was on top. On top, tucked into the inside of the lid, held by a thin elastic band gone brittle with age, was a business card. Creamstock. Navy lettering. It was newer than everything else in the box, deliberately placed where the first thing a person saw would be this, and not the photographs underneath. Marion Webb. Then a title that made my breath catch, because I read titles like this for a living. Independent Trustee, Coastal Fiduciary Partners. Under it, in my mother's own handwriting, 3 words in blue ink. Call her first. A trustee. My mother had retained an independent corporate trustee. That meant there was a trust. Not a will, not a probate file my father would have controlled. A trust, with its own fiduciary, separate from him entirely. I was a real estate lawyer sitting on a concrete floor at midnight, and my whole profession went very quiet and very alert. The card had a phone number. I told myself it was midnight, that no fiduciary answers at midnight, that I'd call in the morning when I was rested and rational. I called anyway. I couldn't not. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, awake and unsurprised, as if she'd been expecting the phone to ring for a long time. This is Marian Webb. My name is Gabrielle Townsend. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I think you knew my mother. A pause. Then something I will never forget. Miss Townsend, she said quietly. I've been waiting a long time for this call. We met the next morning, in an office that smelled like paper and good coffee. Marian Webb was 60, silver-haired, precise. She had a way of folding her hands that told me she'd given hard news before and done it kindly. On the table between us sat a single closed folder, thick, with my mother's name on the tab. Diane M. Townsend Family Trust. Your mother engaged my firm in 2007, she said. 2 years before she passed. She was very organized about it. People who've built something from nothing usually are. Why the wait? I asked. You said as much on the phone. Marian opened the folder but kept her hand flat on the first page, not yet turning it. Because the trust has a provision, she said. Several, actually. Your mother instructed that I not approach you, that I wait for you to come to me, on your own. And there was a timing condition. She looked at me. You're 36 now. I turned 36 in October. Then the condition is met. She paused. Your mother believed that if I came to you too early, the family would find a way to make it about the money. She wanted you to come on your own legs, when you were ready to look. She used a phrase. She said she didn't want to hand her daughter a weapon. She wanted to hand her a choice. I sat very still. 16 years of believing the hotel had simply passed to my father. 16 years of letting them rename a fund and pull a plaque off a wall, because I thought there was nothing of my mother's left to defend. Mrs. Webb, I said, what exactly is in that folder? She turned the first page. Almost everything you think your father owns, she said. She laid it out the way good fiduciaries do, slowly, in order, watching my face. The trust owned a holding company. Quiet, single purpose, the kind nobody notices. And that holding company owned a piece of real estate. Which property? I asked, though my stomach already knew. The land, Marian said, the waterfront parcel, and the building on it. She turned a page. The Harbor Crown. I'd spent 14 years writing structures exactly like this one for my clients. Separate the bricks from the business, put the real estate in one entity, the operating company in another, and let the operating company lease the building from the property owner. Lawyers call it an opco-propco split. Rich families call it sleeping soundly. My mother had built the propco. My father's company was the opco. The Hale Collection doesn't own the hotel, I said slowly. It rents it. It leases it, Marian corrected. From a trust your father has been a co-trustee of, on a strictly limited basis, since your mother died. She let that sit. He has never owned the building, Gabrielle, or the land. Neither has his wife. I'm going to stop here for 1 second because I know some of you are already shouting at your screen. Open the rest of it, Gabrielle. I felt the same way about myself, sitting in that office. If you've ever avoided a door for years because of what might be behind it, type the box in the comments. And subscribe, because the next page is the one that finally woke me up. Marian turned that next page. There's one more asset in the trust, she said, beyond the land and the building. How much? She told me. I had to put my coffee down. $17 million, held in the trust as reserve capital, untouched, growing quietly in conservative funds for 16 years. My mother had set it aside as a cushion so that whoever inherited the hotel would never have to mortgage it the way she once had. But the number wasn't what undid me. The letter was. Marian slid it across the table last, in its own sealed envelope, my name on the front in blue ink. The same blue ink as the card. I recognized the slant of the G before I touched it. I opened it there, with Marian politely studying the window. My mother's letter was not long. She was never long. Gabby, she wrote, if you're reading this, you found the box, and you found Marian, and you finally let yourself look. I know how long that took you. I know you, sweetheart, better than you think. I didn't build all of this so you'd be rich. I built it so no one could ever make you small. A house in your name is a house no one can throw you out of. Your father is a good man and a weak one. After I'm gone, he will want peace more than he wants what's right, and someone will offer him peace at your expense. Don't hate him for it. Just don't pay for it. And then the line I have thought about every single day since. Don't fight them, sweetheart. Just stop renting them your silence. I read it 3 times. I folded it once, along the crease she'd made, and I put it in my breast pocket where I could feel it against my chest. The water doesn't belong to whoever's loudest. It belongs to whoever stays. She hadn't been talking about Sal. She'd been talking about me. I made Marian walk me through every page, slowly, like a client who couldn't afford a mistake. Because I couldn't. Here is what my mother had done, in plain terms. She placed the land and the building into the trust before she died. The trust leased both to the operating company, the one my father ran, on a long-term lease with modest rent. That lease is why nobody ever questioned it. The hotel operated. The rent got paid into the trust. On paper, everything looked like a family business humming along, but ownership of the bricks never moved. It sat in the trust the whole time. My father was named interim co-trustee, alongside Marian's firm, with deliberately narrow powers. He could approve operating decisions. He could not sell the property. He could not amend the trust. He could not remove the independent trustee. My mother had built a fence around him so high he apparently forgot it was a fence. And the successor. Your mother named you sole successor trustee, Marian said, with full powers, vesting on your 36th birthday. Until that date, the family's arrangement was protected. After that date, you have the unilateral right to assume sole control of the trust and everything it holds. The land, the building, the 17 million. I sat back in the chair. For 16 years, Vivian Hale had been peeling my mother's name off a building my mother still owned. Brooke had redesigned the napkins in a hotel her family merely rented. My father had let a guard put a hand on the rightful owner's arm and asked her not to make a scene. They had been rebranding a house that was never theirs. And the lease said I could end it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the trust documents fanned out under a lamp and argued with myself until dawn. The easy path was to do nothing. I had a good life. My own firm, my own name on my own door. I could fold the letter back into my pocket, drive home, and let the Harbor Crown stay a place I used to know. I'd survived 16 years without it. That was the version of me that called surrender dignity. I knew her well. The hard path wasn't revenge. I want to keep being honest with you, because the difference matters. I did not want to ruin Vivian. I did not lie awake imagining her crying. The picture in my head wasn't her face at all. It was the window. The tall one in the lobby, looking out at the dock, where a brass plaque used to hang. I didn't want the hotel for the money. I had money. I didn't want it for the power. I wanted my mother's name back on that wall. And I wanted the lie to stop standing where the truth used to be. You can call that revenge if you want. I call it bookkeeping. A debt had been running for 16 years, and I finally had the authority to close the account. By the time the sun came up over the parking lot outside my window, I'd made the decision. Not with anger, with the same calm I used to sign a closing. I called Marian at 8. I want to assume the trusteeship, I said. All of it. Tell me how we do this correctly, so it holds up if they fight. They'll fight, she said. Let them, I said. I read the lease. They didn't. I spent the next week doing what I do best, reading. I read the lease the way I'd read it for a stranger paying me $400 an hour, and on the fourth night, in the dense back pages where people stop paying attention, I found it. A covenant. My mother, careful even about the things she loved, had written protection for her own name into the lease itself. The operating company was permitted to run the hotel, but it agreed to preserve and maintain the Harbor Crown name, the founder's commemorative plaque, and the Diane Townsend Fund as standing features of the property. Any rebranding required the property owner's written consent, the property owner being the trust being, now, me. Vivian had not asked the trust for consent. Of course she hadn't. She didn't know the trust existed. The Hale Collection rebrand was a breach. Folding the Diane Townsend Fund into the Hale Family Initiative was a breach. Taking the plaque off the wall and shoving it into fourth-floor storage was, in the literal language of a contract my mother wrote on her deathbed, a breach. Diane's gone, Vivian had told me, 4 years ago, over wine. This is the Hale era now. It turned out my mother had reached out of the grave and written, in advance, the exact clause that made the Hale era illegal. I sat with that for a long moment, not gloating, just quietly amazed at the woman who raised me, who had seen all of this coming and built the trap so gently that no one noticed they were standing in it. I photographed every page, I made copies, I built a file the way I'd build it for trial. Then Marion called with the part that set the clock ticking. There's something you need to know about timing, Marion said, and it changes things. The trust received financial statements from the operating company, a condition of the lease. The latest set had just come in. Marion had read them the way I read leases. The Hale Collection is refinancing, she said. A large commercial loan, still in underwriting, set to close in about 3 weeks. They're using it to fund an expansion, a second property up the coast. And the collateral? That's the part. I could hear her choosing her words. The loan application represents that the borrower owns the Harbor Crown real estate. The land and the building are listed as the primary asset securing the debt. The lender's title review isn't finished, and the borrower's own counsel has been the one feeding them the ownership paperwork. I closed my eyes. The whole gala, the champagne tower, the investors, the reporter, the speeches about the bright future of the Hale Collection. It hadn't been vanity. It had been a sales pitch. They were dressing up the company to borrow against a building they didn't own. They're pledging my mother's property to a bank, I said, as if it's theirs. They believe it is theirs, Marion said. That's the charitable reading. And the uncharitable one? That somewhere in that company, someone knows about the trust and is hoping you never look in the box. I thought about the business card placed deliberately at the top, where I'd see it first. I thought about my mother's certainty that someone would offer my father peace at my expense. 3 weeks. That was the window. If the loan closed against that collateral, untangling it would take years and lawyers and a courtroom, and the harm would already be done. But if I assumed the trusteeship before it closed, cleanly, on the record, the truth would simply be the truth. No courtroom required. I had 3 weeks to stop being silent. People expect this part to be dramatic. It wasn't. That's exactly why it worked. There was no dumpster fire, no shouting match, no clever speech rehearsed in a mirror. There was paperwork, and I am very, very good at paperwork. Marion and I built the file together over 4 days. An acceptance of trusteeship, the document by which a named successor formally takes the role. A notice to the existing co-trustee, my father, that his interim role was ending by the trust's own terms. A certification of trust, the short legal summary a property owner provides to prove control. And a folder of clean evidence, the deed, the lease, the rent ledger, the photographs of the breach. Everything correct. Everything dated. Everything done the way it would have to survive a hostile lawyer reading it line by line, looking for the trapdoor, the way I would. You understand what happens when we serve this? Marion said on the last evening, sliding the signature pages across the table. I assume sole control of the trust, I said. The land, the building, the reserve. And the lease, she said. As property owner, you'll have standing to enforce its terms, including the breach, including, if you choose, termination for cause. Termination for cause. I rolled the phrase around. My mother had given me a key, and the key happened to fit the front door of the house they'd thrown me out of. I signed nothing that night. Not yet. I wanted to do one thing first, the kind of thing that doesn't show up in any file. I wanted to stand in the lobby one more time, after hours, with no champagne tower and no Vivian, and decide for certain what kind of person I was going to be when this was over. So I called Sal. Before I could get to Sal, the company got to me. A courier reached my office at 4 on a Thursday with a thick envelope. The return address was a law firm I knew by reputation. Inside was a cease and desist letter, 3 pages, signed by Gregory Pace, General Counsel, the Hale Collection. So they'd found out I'd been asking Marion's firm questions. Someone had panicked. I read it twice. It was aggressive and confident and, in places, almost insulting. It accused me of harassing the company's fiduciary partners and attempting to interfere with a legitimate family business. It demanded I cease all inquiries into matters that do not concern me. Then came the part that was supposed to end the conversation. Pace claimed the trust had been amended. He attached a document titled First Amendment to the Diane M. Townsend Family Trust, removing me as successor and naming my father as sole trustee with full powers, including the power to sell. It was dated 11 years ago. It bore my father's signature. If that amendment were real, I'd just lost everything before I started. I felt the floor tilt for exactly one breath. Then the lawyer in me woke up, the one who reads the dense back pages, and I started looking at the document instead of fearing it. Because Gregory Pace had made one mistake, the mistake confident people make. He'd assumed I'd be too shocked to read carefully. He had sent a forgery to a forensic real estate attorney and called it leverage. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down, and read the amendment the way I read everything. Line by line, looking for the trapdoor. It took me about 90 seconds to find 3. The first problem was the trust itself. My mother's trust became irrevocable on the day she died. Irrevocable means exactly what it sounds like. No one can amend it after that. Not my father, not Pace, not anyone. The document was dated 11 years ago. My mother had been gone 5 years by then. You cannot amend a trust on behalf of a woman in the ground. The second problem was consent. Even a valid amendment to this trust required the written consent of the independent trustee. There was no signature from Marion's firm anywhere on the page. None had ever been requested. The third problem was smaller, and somehow the worst. The amendment referred to the Diane Townsend Foundation. My mother never used the word foundation. It was the fund, the Diane Townsend Fund. Whoever drafted this had copied the name off Vivian's rebranding, off the Hale Family Initiative paperwork, and never checked the original. A forger who doesn't know the dead woman's own words is a forger who wasn't there. Here's the thing nobody told Gregory Pace. I read trust documents for a living. He sent a fabrication to the one person on Earth most likely to take it apart, and he did it because, years ago, this family decided who I was and never updated the file. If you've ever been underestimated by people who stopped paying attention to you, you already know how this feels, and you know it's a gift. Hit subscribe. The quiet part is almost over. I called Marion and read her the 3 problems. She was silent for a moment. Gabrielle, she said, do you understand what they just did? They handed me proof of intent, I said. They handed you a courtroom, she said. If you want one. I did not want a courtroom. I wanted the lobby. Sal met me at the service entrance at 11, the night the hotel ran on its skeleton crew. He let me in without a word and walked me to the freight elevator, the one my mother used to ride when the boilers acted up. 4th floor, he said, past the linen, back corner. The storage room smelled like dust and old paint. Folded banquet tables, a retired chandelier wrapped in plastic. And there, Behind 3 plastic bins of Hale collection signage, leaning face down against the wall like something hidden in shame, was my mother's plaque. I turned it over. The brass had gone dark with neglect, dull where it used to catch the light. But the engraving was still there. Every letter, exactly as I'd traced them as a child. Built on the water, kept by the people who mean it. Out the storage window, across the black harbor, the buoy bell rang. 11 o'clock now, not 6, but the same low note my mother stopped to hear. It reached me 4 stories up, faint, and it didn't sound like a death knell anymore. It sounded like a roll call. Whoever stays. I'd come up here to decide what kind of person I'd be. Standing over that tarnished plaque with the bell in the dark, I had my answer, and it surprised me with how gentle it was. I wasn't going to burn anything down. I wasn't going to bury them in court. I was going to put this plaque back on that wall, by the window, where she put it, and I was going to do it as the person who legally owned the wall. I called Marion from the freight elevator. "I'm ready to sign," I said. My father called me before I signed. Some part of him must have sensed the ground shifting. We met at a diner halfway between his world and mine, a neutral booth with bad coffee. He looked older than at the gala, smaller. For a moment, watching him fold and unfold a napkin, I remembered being 7 and holding his hand at this very chain of diners, and something in me ached. "Your mother set something up," he said. "Didn't she? Before." "You knew?" I knew there was a trust. He wouldn't look at me. I never knew the details. Vivian's people handled it. They told me everything was fine. "They told you to sign an amendment," I said quietly. 11 years ago. His hands went still. So he remembered. And in that stillness, for one real moment, I saw it cross his face. The grief he'd buried under 16 years of keeping the peace. His eyes filled. "I miss her," he said. "Your mother. Every day. I'm not the man she thought I was." It was the closest thing to honest he'd given me in my adult life, and I almost reached across the table. Then he ruined it. "Gabby." He leaned in, lowering his voice the way he had at the gala. "Whatever she set up, whatever you've found, please, don't blow up the family. Vivian did her best for us. Just don't make a scene. Don't make a scene." There it was again. Even now. Even with his eyes still wet, the first instinct was to protect the comfort that cost me everything. I understood him then, completely, and stopped hoping. "I'm not going to make a scene, Dad," I said, and I meant it more literally than he could know. "I'm just going to tell the truth on paper." I drove home from that diner knowing exactly how I would do it. Vivian's whole method was noise, a loud rebrand, a loud party, a loud command to a guard in front of investors and a reporter. She used spectacle the way other people use fists. She'd humiliated me in public because public is where she felt strongest. So I would not answer her in public. I would answer her with the public. Not a scene, a record. The witnesses to my humiliation, the board members by the window, the investors at the bar, the lender about to wire millions against my mother's land, they had all watched Vivian declare that I wasn't family. They were about to receive, in clean, dated, unarguable documents, the simple fact of who actually owned the room. No shouting, no tears, no clever speech. Just the truth, delivered to the exact same audience, in writing they couldn't spin. That was the asymmetry of it, and I'll admit I admired the shape. Vivian's weapon was public shame. Mine would be public truth. She had a microphone and a guard. I had a deed and a lease, and the law of the state. She'd spent 16 years rewriting my mother's story out loud. I was going to file the original. I laid the signature pages out on my kitchen table that night. The acceptance of trusteeship, the notice to my father, the certification of trust, the lease, flagged at the breach, the forged amendment, which I would not need in court, but which I kept because it told me everything about how little they expected of me. I uncapped my pen, and I thought about the bell and the window and a woman who built a trap so gentle nobody felt it close. I signed on a Tuesday morning at my own kitchen table, with the deed laid out beside the cedar box. I want you to picture how unremarkable it looked. A woman in a sweater, a cup of coffee going cold, a fountain pen. No drama. The most powerful thing I did that month made no sound at all. I signed the acceptance of trusteeship. With that one signature, by the plain terms of my mother's trust, I became sole trustee of everything she'd protected. The land, the building, the $17 million. Then I authorized Marion to act. Her firm served the notice on my father, formally ending his interim role. Her firm transmitted the certification of trust to the Lenders' Council, the bank still finishing its diligence on that loan, putting them on clear notice, in writing, of who actually owned the collateral. And as the property owner, I issued a formal notice of default under the lease, citing the breach. The rebrand, the fund, the plaque in the fourth-floor storage room. I didn't terminate the lease that morning. I didn't have to. The notice of default, sent to the lender mid-financing, did the work all by itself. Then I set the pen down, washed my coffee cup, and put my phone face down on the counter. It started buzzing at 11:42. I let it. I went for a walk. I bought groceries. I came home and made dinner and listened to the buzzing migrate across the counter like an angry insect. When I finally turned the phone over, the screen told me what 16 years of silence had cost them in a single afternoon. 68 missed calls. Vivian, my father, Brooke, Gregory Pace. The same names, over and over, in a panic I could feel through the glass. I didn't call a single one of them back. I had said everything I needed to say in writing. There's a particular kind of power in not picking up. For 16 years, the silence in our family had run one direction. They didn't call. I didn't exist. My mother's name came off the wall, and not one phone rang to ask me how I felt about it. Now the silence ran the other way, and it was mine. The voicemails came in waves, and I listened to them all that evening, sitting at the kitchen table with the deed still out, because I wanted to understand exactly who these people were when the building stopped belonging to them. The first ones, from Pace, were lawyerly and cold. Ms. Townsend, your actions are reckless and exposing the company to serious harm. Call my office immediately. He still called it the company. He still thought he had standing. The middle ones, from Brooke, were almost funny. This is insane. You can't just take a hotel. I'm the creative director. As if a title someone's mother handed her meant anything against a deed. Then my father's. 3 of them, each more frightened than the last. Gabby, the bank is calling. They're saying the loan can't close. What did you do? Please call me back. And then Vivian. I saved hers for last. Her first message was honey. Gabrielle, sweetheart, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Let's just sit down like family. Family, the word she'd handed to a guard. Her third message was not honey. You ungrateful little nothing, after everything we built. You think a piece of paper makes this yours? We will bury you in court. Do you hear me? We will bury you. I listened to the threat twice, calmly, the way you'd listen to a weather report for a town you no longer live in. She'd told a guard I wasn't family. She was finally right about something. Family doesn't hold the deed. The owner does. I deleted the voicemails, all 68, and went to bed. By midnight, they were at my door. The knock came at 12:10. Then the buzzer, held down, insistent. I looked through the peephole and saw all 3 of them crowded into the hallway of my building. Vivian in a coat she'd clearly thrown over whatever she'd been wearing. My father, gray and shaking. Brooke, filming on her phone before I'd even opened the door. I considered not answering. But I'd spent 16 years not answering doors, and look where that got me. I opened it. You don't get to do this, Vivian said, pushing forward before the door was fully open. You don't get to crawl back after 16 years and steal what we built. I didn't steal anything. My voice came out level, almost soft. It surprised even me. Come in. You're letting the cold in. That threw her. She'd come for a fight, and I'd offered her a chair. They filed into my small kitchen. The deed was still on the table. Vivian's eyes went to it and away. Fast. Like it burned. The bank pulled the loan, my father said. His hands wouldn't stay still. 40 million. Gone. They're saying we don't own the building. Gabby, that's not possible. I've run that hotel for 16 years. You've run it, I agreed. You never owned it. Mom did. Now I do. This is fraud, Vivian snapped. We'll have lawyers. You already sent one. I slid the forged amendment across the table toward her. Gregory Pace, he sent me this. A trust amendment dated 5 years after Mom died, with no independent trustee consent, naming a foundation Mom never called a foundation. It's not even a good forgery, Vivian. It's just a confession with a signature line. The kitchen went very quiet. Brooke lowered her phone. My father stared at the document, and I watched him understand, finally, what he'd signed 11 years ago in some conference room, while Vivian's people told him everything was fine. I didn't know, he whispered. Vivian, I didn't... Shut up, Richard, she said. And that, more than anything, told the whole room who had built the Hale era. It was never my father. He'd just rented them his silence, the same as me. The difference was, I'd stopped. Vivian recovered fast. People like her always do. Fine. She straightened her coat, gathering the old confidence. You own the bricks. Congratulations. But the business is ours. The brand, the bookings, the staff. The Hale collection is worth nothing without the company that runs it. So you'll lease it to us, and you'll be reasonable, because an empty hotel earns you nothing. It was, I'll give her, a decent play. She'd found the one piece of leverage she had left and reached for it. She didn't know I'd already used the lease against her. There's no lease to negotiate, I said. There's a lease in default. You breached it the day you took my mother's name off that building without the owner's consent. I sent the notice this morning. The lender has a copy. So does the board. The board? Her voice thinned. You contacted the board. As the property owner, I'm required to. I kept it factual, almost boring, because boring was the most devastating register I had. Every member who stood at that window watching you have me removed received the same packet I sent the bank. The deed, the lease, the default, the forged amendment your counsel was kind enough to put in writing. I watched it land. Not in her, she was past landing, but in my father, who sank into a kitchen chair like his legs had quit. The investors from the Gala, he said hollowly. They've been calling me all night. They thought we owned it. Gabby, they invested because they thought... Because Vivian told them a story, I said. I just sent them the documents. The reporter from the Business Journal had been at that gala too. By morning, the story would not be the bright future of the Hale collection. The story would be that a coastal hotel had tried to borrow $40 million against a building it didn't own, and the real owner had quietly, legally, put a stop to it before the wire cleared. No scene. No shouting from me anyway. Just the truth, sent to the same room that had watched me get thrown out, arriving in envelopes instead of accusations. Vivian turned to me, and the honey was entirely gone now. You did this on purpose, Vivian said. All of it. To humiliate us. No. I meant it. You did the humiliating. I just stopped paying for it. That was when she broke. Not into apology. People like Vivian never apologize, but into the full performance. The one she'd probably used to get everything she'd ever taken. Her eyes filled on command. Her voice cracked. You have no idea what I went through, she said, the tears coming now. Your father was a wreck when I met him. I held this family together. I built that brand from a tired old hotel with a dead woman's name on it. I earned this. And you abandoned all of us for 16 years and now you sweep in and... Vivian. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The deed was on the table between us, and it did all the shouting either of us would ever need. You called my mother a dead woman in my kitchen, in front of her daughter, while standing in a building she still owns. Vivian's mouth closed. I stood up. Not fast. Not angry. I just stood, because some things you say on your feet At your gala, I said. You told a guard to remove me. You said I wasn't family. Do you remember? She didn't answer. She remembered. You were right, I said quietly. I'm not family. I'm the landlord. The word filled the small kitchen like cold air off the harbor. You can keep your name, I went on. Stay Vivian Hale. Run whatever company you can run somewhere else. But you will not keep my mother's. Her name goes back on that wall. The fund goes back to her. The Hale era ends with this signature, the same way it should have ended 16 years ago, if anyone in this family had been willing to read the documents instead of just signing them. My father made a small broken sound. Brooke had stopped filming entirely. I held the door open. You came to my home at midnight to tell me I couldn't do this, I said. I already did it this morning, before lunch, quietly, the way my mother taught me. I had not made a scene. I had simply, after 16 years, stopped renting them my silence. They left. Vivian first, then Brooke. My father lingered in the doorway, searching for something to say, and found nothing worth keeping. The fallout was quieter than you'd expect, and far more total. The loan never closed. The lender, once it had the trust documents, would not wire $40 million against collateral the borrower didn't own. The expansion died on the table. Without it, and with a notice of default hanging over the lease, the operating company had no future running my mother's hotel. I gave them a choice, because my mother's letter asked me to. They could negotiate a fair market-rate lease with the name and the fund and the plaque restored, under terms I controlled. Or they could walk away and let me bring in an operator who would. Vivian couldn't stomach being a tenant in the building she'd tried to own. She walked. So did Brooke and her napkins. Gregory Pace resigned within the month. The forged amendment a quiet problem he'd be explaining to a licensing board for some time. My father stayed on in a small honorary role I created for him because he was still my father, and because my mother had told me not to hate him. 2 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of the Harbor Crown, by the tall window that looks out at the dock. The chrome panel was gone. In its place hung my mother's plaque, the brass cleaned and recast, the letters catching the light again. Built on the water, kept by the people who mean it. I'd had it remounted exactly where she put it. A few inches lower so a child could trace the letters. Sal stood beside me, hands folded, the way he used to stand beside her. She'd have liked that, he said. You doing it without shouting. She wrote it that way, I said. Out past the dock, in the late afternoon, the buoy bell rang. This time it didn't sound like a death knell, or a roll call. It sounded like a homecoming. I didn't burn their lives down. I want you to know that. Because I think it matters. I could have. The forged amendment alone could have ended careers and started lawsuits that ran for years. The lender would have happily helped me chase damages. There was a version of this story where I left Vivian with nothing. I chose a different one. They kept their personal money, their cars, their house. I didn't touch a dollar that was actually theirs. What I took back was only ever my mother's. The land, the building, the 17 million, and her name on a wall. The Harbor Crown runs under the trust now, managed by people who pour the coffee and know the boiler. The Diane Townsend Fund sends local kids to culinary school again, fully funded from the reserve she left for exactly this kind of future. The first scholarship recipient starts in the fall. I kept my own firm, 3 hours away, but I drive out most weekends. I sit in the lobby by the window and I work, and at 6 the bell rings, and I stop to listen the way she taught me. My father and I talk now. Carefully. Not as much as he'd like, more than I once thought possible. He visits the hotel sometimes and stands a long time in front of the plaque. I let him. Grief is allowed, even late. Vivian I haven't heard from. I don't expect to. People who build their lives on someone else's silence tend to go quiet themselves when it ends. The cedar box sits on my desk now, latch open, my mother's letter inside, the line she wrote facing up where I can see it every morning. I read it before I sign anything important. I think I always will. People ask if I forgave them. That's the wrong question, and it took me 16 years and 1 cedar box to learn the right one. The boundary isn't built on forgiveness or grudge. It's built on a deed and a name and a wall, on knowing exactly what is mine and refusing, ever again, to pretend it isn't. Because here's the only thing I really learned. What's built on someone else's silence only stands until the day they finally decide to stop being silent. That's my story. One signature, one name back on a wall. If a family ever made you doubt your own history, go open the box you've been avoiding. You might own more than they let you believe. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.